Welcome. Well, we now have a fantastic series of rapid sessions for you. Over the next 60 minutes, we have 3 presentations from industry and regulator representatives. First, we will hear from Lucas Turner from Esso Australia, followed by Brett Maher from LyondellBasell and Ross Boots from WorkSafe Victoria. Following each session, you will have an opportunity to ask questions to each of the 3 presenters. So remember, as questions come to mind during each session, please submit them. To start us off, I would like to welcome Lucas Turner, Risk, Environment and Regulatory Group Supervisor for Esso Australia. Welcome, Lucas. Now, Lucas's presentation titled Enhancing Process Safety in Challenging Times will highlight Esso's approach to leveraging the safety case and safety management system approach to making process safety personal. Over to you now, Lucas.
All right, thanks, Yvette. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects also to the elders past, present and emerging. Major hazards don't become less important with a lower product price, activity levels or times of unprecedented change. And amongst these challenges, Esso has focused on increasing process safety literacy and workforce engagement in managing the health of our safeguards. And this presentation shares our approach to leveraging the safety case and the safety management system approach to try and make process safety personal. I'd like to start maybe with a little bit about ExxonMobil within Australia, just to give a context to what I'll talk about. We have an extensive major hazardous facility operating footprint in Australia and a long history and experience that goes with that. The Gippsland Basin joint venture supplies around 50% of Eastern Australia's domestic demand for natural gas and also provides gas for power as a feedstock for industry. We have around 23 offshore facility installations. We have over 600 kilometres of subsea pipelines and 2 major onshore MHFs, Longford, where we do crude stabilisation and gas processing, and Long Island Point, where we do crude storage and LPG fractionation. In our downstream and midstream businesses, we have the Mobile Altona refinery, which provides around half of the automotive and jet fuel needs of Australia. There are also distribution terminals in Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales, and refueling facilities at the Melbourne and Adelaide airport. So as I said before, major hazards don't become less important with a lower product price, activity levels, or unprecedented change or disruption. Many MHFs have experienced that coincident demand and value destruction that has occurred during the global pandemic in 2020, where limited cash flow necessitates really disciplined management in order to continue to address process safety hazards. And there's also been the challenge of maintaining critical operations in a safe manner. We're all seeing the increasing and rapidly evolving societal expectations on all aspects of our performance. With each relicensing cycle, our MHFs are 5 years older, and we have to manage age and obsolescence whilst striving for continuous improvement year on year. And we have to be able to demonstrate that to ourselves ostensibly and to our regulators and the community. At the same time, Esso and Mobil are tackling a significant change agenda. Through this decade, the Gippsland Basin will execute decommissioning on a scale not seen before in Australia. This is a significant workload and a potential distraction to managing process safety in our operating assets. There remains much potential in the Gippsland Basin, as the recent commissioning and startup of the West Barracuda development attests to. More recently, the Altona refinery has made the difficult decision to cease refining and convert to a supply terminal operation. The footprint reduction for these major hazard facilities will achieve a dividend in process safety performance through the elimination of risks across our business. But it's also a challenge to manage these risks during the transition. Amongst these challenges, ExxonMobil's focused on increasing process safety literacy and workforce engagement in managing the health of our safeguards. This presentation really shares our approach to how we've tried to do that in leveraging the safety case and the safety management system approach to making process safety personal. Many of you would be familiar with the schematic on this slide that demonstrates the evolution of safety performance enhancements over time. Whilst this is often shown within a personal safety context, the performance of our people every day is critical to process safety outcomes. Indeed, people are at the very centre of all of this, the beating heart of our safety performance. There are 4 key areas to how Esso is focused on our safety case and improving process safety performance. Managing the risks through an effective safety management system, proactively managing major hazards, scenarios and safeguards in place, our people and human performance, equipping the people with the tools and experiences to be successful, and finally, learning from experiences, applying the lessons learned from personal and from colleagues' experiences in industry. The first 2 features make up a core part of the safety case, and I'd like to share our thoughts on engaging our workforce and human performance. Esso has developed a process safety roadmap to broaden understanding of the higher consequence scenarios in our business and ownership of the critical safeguards that prevent a major accident from occurring. This initiative leverages the comprehensive value of the existing safety cases and safety management system. As you might appreciate, a hazard register or a bow tie diagram for a section of a large plant like Longford runs over multiple pages in extensive detail. And if you're not involved in preparing the bow tie diagram or hazard register, it can be very challenging to engage with and to understand at that level. So we had a conversation internally around what does good look like? And it can be summed up by the 3 words on the page there: clarity, ownership, and accountability. Critical safeguards need to be clearly defined and their health status owned by a specific role, i.e. a person with the right responsibility within the asset team. Critical safeguards can only be green to be healthy or red for unhealthy. There is no amber traffic light for the criticality of our safeguards and the health of them, and that health must be defined and measurable. Prompt communication of unhealthy safeguards needs to occur to senior management, and that needs to come along with both a resolution plan and ownership and timing for that resolution. Regular stewardship of our safeguard health and periodic review of scenarios by our asset and senior management is scheduled into their calendars ahead of time and honoured. Function testing outcomes forms part of the safeguard health discussion, and sharing learnings around the degraded safeguards is actively encouraged within the business. And the second aspect of this is that human performance is critical as people design the facility, they develop the safety management system, and they operate and maintain the safeguards to ensure safe operating conditions in the plant. But people make mistakes. So safeguard design must be robust and error tolerant. We need to build in independent verification steps and require people to demonstrate competency before they operate facilities and periodically reassess that. Well-meaning deviations to get the job done can result in mistakes. So we need to establish clear expectations and accountability on deviation processes. We are fostering a positive process safety culture in which it's okay to ask for help, to speak up about a degraded safeguard, to use your stop work authority, to collaborate and look out for each other. A leader's response to mistakes directly impacts the culture of both learning and accountability. So a good leader would influence the team to focus on process safety every day, to inspire collaboration, to challenge the team to test the health of those critical safeguards every time they interact with them, and to encourage the team to learn. Major process safety events are often complex and can present a high bar for entry and participation in the conversation. Our aim is to engage everyone, whether that be operations, maintenance, construction, technical, leadership. Everyone should be involved in the conversation. So early in this process, we used a non-process safety industry example of the tragic Dreamworld incident in 2016 that claimed the lives of 4 people as a kickoff point. If you're unfamiliar with this incident, the ride involves 6 riders who sit in a circular raft. that follow down a turbulent river that travels up a conveyor belt and then down a waterfall. The water flow is driven by pumps, and water is made turbulent by underwater obstacles. And in 2016, a water pump tripped, reducing the flow and the water level. An empty raft got stuck on an underwater obstacle and was impacted by the next raft, which flipped. The second raft was carrying 6 passengers. 4 adults were killed and 2 children escaped. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the work of Trish Kerrin at the IChemE Safety Centre, from which this idea germinated for us, and her paper which aided in our development of this material. So I've included a link to a publicly available version of this on the slide. Trish used available material from the coronial inquest and the media to think about how process safety fundamentals might be used to prevent a tragic incident like this. So you can immediately see that this was a high consequence event and a low likelihood of occurrence, which meets that definition of a process safety event. Now, at the time of preparing this material, it was about 2019, end of 2019, the coronial inquest was still underway regarding the Thunder River Rapids ride. So this scenario uses a number of hypothetical elements included solely for the purposes of prompting an internal discussion and learning opportunities with respect to process safety at Esso. Now, rather than take you through the features of this particular example in detail, I wanted to show you a completed real scenario for an Esso asset on the following slide. This slide shows an example of a completed scenario for a production flow line failure that might occur on one of our offshore producing platforms. Now, you can see a number of key features that are shown on the slide. There are multiple initiating events that might lead to a loss of containment that we're trying to avoid. There's clear ownership defined of both the overall scenario at the right level, in this case the offshore asset manager, and for each of the critical safeguards that are shown on the slide there. And you can see that in each case, we're talking about a frontline supervisor, a maintenance supervisor, or even an offshore installation manager or a manager within the business. Someone who has the right authority to act on the information and correct where needed. The health of the safeguards are shown on the page here. In this case, all the safeguards are shown as effective, and so they're green. We've also highlighted where there's a clear human factor linkage. So where there is a heavy reliance on procedures and practices in order for that activity to function on demand and function successfully, we've highlighted that as a human safeguard. And finally, there's a strong linkage back to the safety case, the heritage from which this diagram comes from. And so you can see in the notes that the specific accident event register for the safety case is referenced, and there's a link through to the performance criteria as well. Now, we've had a number of lessons learned so far in going through this process. The health status of some of the safeguards could not be assessed with the information that we had on hand at the time. And this meant that some additional performance testing was required to gain contemporary assurance. And that can be a bit of a shock to say, wow, at this point in time, I actually have to expand my program in order to understand whether a safeguard is effective. And I have an obligation to be doing that already. So there were 1 or 2 situations where we felt we actually didn't have enough information to accurately decide whether the safeguard was effective or not. And almost green can be a really difficult conversation to have. And that's why there's no amber safeguard. It forced us to select red in a few cases, and that drove the right organizational response. We had to communicate the status, we had to align on a case for action, and then we had to go and implement the corrective actions in a timely manner. I'd like to finish up today by outlining some forward plans for Esso in this space. With respect to further strengthening the engagement with our safety cases, Esso's identified approximately 50 potential incidents across our business that we will take through this process, and we've developed around a third of these into scenarios through 2020. The next third are going to be developed this year, and this tranche will incorporate the lessons learned through 2020. Furthermore, sustainment is a key part of making this work on an ongoing basis. And some of those activities include identifying higher consequence equipment within the maintenance system. So cross-linking this and then linking the scenarios to the permit system as lessons learned so that this material can be used in preparing for maintenance. This will ensure that we extract the value of these scenarios each time we interact with our facilities. In the human performance space, enhancements have been made to operational leadership training, and they continue to be rolled out. Second and third line leadership roles require assessment before their authority can be assumed in the role. This year, a number of critical safeguards that rely on human performance will also be assessed in a separate workshop to ensure that the procedures support precise execution in the field every time. And with respect to learning from experience, we'll continue to share the lessons learned from process safety events and look for novel ways to engage our teams. We'll also complete a process safety assessment for 2 scenarios this year. In essence, this is getting in an independent auditor from somewhere in our business to look at each of the safeguards and test their health. And this includes going out into the field and asking the operations team to show me that the safeguard works by pressing the button. And that might be a shutdown system or a deluge system, for example. So thank you for the opportunity to share this with you today. You'll no doubt have noted that none of the concepts are new. It's a careful focus on communication and clarity that achieves the performance outcomes that we're all striving for. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. To our audience, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. So should you have any questions for Lucas, please do enter them via the Q&A box. Well, we do have some questions already for you, so let's get going. So firstly, have you developed a specific process safety framework that you would apply to manage the risk of decommissioning assets? And if yes, would you be able to share some learnings from it?
Yeah, decommissioning is a huge topic in and of itself. And we are stepping through a lot of the preparation phases right now to get the framework right in order to decommission through this decade. Yeah, in a sense, you need to see decommissioning as being almost building in reverse. And so the project takes a long time to get all the right elements in place and then execute. Right now, we're focusing on the operating aspects of the business with respect to rolling out this process safety initiative. So right now, no, but it is on the list of things that we will be looking at. In particular, that interaction between how do you not get distracted by a major project like a decommissioning activity that might be removing 7 or 8 platforms offshore or shutting in an entire gas plant at Longford whilst you're trying to operate the rest of the facility safely.
Thank you for your response to that question. Another one, what prompted this very good initiative?
One of the things that ExxonMobil does globally is monitor the performance of industry, in particular with respect to incidents that occur around the world. And when we pick up on themes that would suggest that industry has an area that we can leverage learnings of others, or that we see performance as not being best practice, then it often leads to an initiative like this process safety initiative. So in a way, it was responding to some of the weak signals that were coming in from industry and some of the more significant events. And it was a desire in the safety space to more directly link the human performance between personal safety on one hand and process safety on the other, given that people are the common link between both of those.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I think we've got time for one final question. So how has the program been received by operational personnel, and do they view it as additional workload or empowerment?
Yeah, look, I think it's as an engineer, I don't wish to speak on behalf of the field folk too much, but certainly I think the The acknowledgement that there are key roles within the business that aren't necessarily the frontline field staff that have a responsibility in ensuring that a safeguard is active and effective and will function on demand has been greatly received. And also the ability to simplify the message of how do you get this right? How do you engage with a safety case? How do you see the value in it? How do you make it an operational document and not a regulatory document? Because it's not meant to be a regulatory document at the end of the day.
Well, look, I think that wraps up a time now, but thank you so much again, Lucas, for your presentation and answering those questions.